Battlefield 1 released to some great reviews last October, and it currently holds an 89% score on Metacritic. It's a great shooter. The World War 1 setting is different. Few big budget games have done this, so it feels relatively fresh. The controls are tight and it's stunning to look at. We've come to expect this of DICE. They're almost unrivaled in terms of solid shooting mechanics and nailing that feeling of being a soldier. But 2015's Star Wars Battlefront left a bad taste in everyone's mouth. It may have been pretty, but God was it shallow. I've never felt genuinely scammed by a game purchase before. It epitomised all that is wrong with the ever-increasing level of soulless corporate cash grabs sold off as video games. But I digress. Let's start with a campaign. The single player is split into 4 different war stories that function as introductions to the different fronts of the conflict. They give you a chance to familiarise yourself with the various weapons and vehicles before diving into the multiplayer. But does it serve as anything beyond tutorialising gameplay mechanics and showing off the visuals? I'm not convinced. It starts off promisingly with a unique sequence demonstrating the harsh brutalities of war. You defend a position from waves of enemies, and each time you die as a player, your soldier's name flashes up and you switch to another grunt somewhere else on the battlefield. It shows how little human life is counted for in these massive battles, and is genuinely thought-provoking. Now, I understand that keeping this same format throughout wouldn't be practical for an entire campaign with named characters, but I hope they at least keep the same tone. This is where the campaign misses the mark for me. The intro mission ends with a cutscene where 2 soldiers lower their weapons after a heavy artillery bombardment. They seem to share a moment of real human solidarity in the face of all of this senseless death. I love that they set this tone right off the bat, because the First World War was a different kind of war than the one that was to follow. It's not quite as easy to disregard the Central Powers as evil villains that had to be stopped. The Germans were not Nazis, and the whole conflict is a moral grey area for a lot of people. Nations were involved over outdated senses of national identity and the glory and heroism of warfare. The French were still thinking in terms of cavalry charges and went to battle in blue uniforms. No one realised how long and terrible it would be, costing the lives of millions on both sides. My point is, this would have been the perfect opportunity for a AAA game to have some real moral ambiguity, similar to what Spec Ops The Line did, where we question whether what we are doing as a player is morally correct. The war stories are centred entirely around the Allies, and while I wouldn't say they paint the enemies as evil per se, they miss an opportunity to break the mould and get the player to use their brain. There's a lot of untold stories from the other side and a sense of fairness missing. There's also a cringy video at the end that tries to wrap the campaign up neatly, suggesting that the point was to make a tribute to those that fought in the war. It comes off as very bizarre and forced. It's like something they tacked on at the end when they realised that the campaign was all over the place tonally. The campaign gameplay is what you'd expect from Battlefield. It doesn't exactly break new ground, but it was nice to play a DICE shooter that has some depth to it. The whole thing kinda reminds me why I used to enjoy World War II shooters back in the day. I miss historical settings in first-person shooters. The emphasis on hindsight aiming instead of red dot thermal vision stuff is refreshing while being less flashy. Having said that, they've taken liberties with some of the more experimental weapons that make it feel more like a World War II shooter. The weapons are well balanced, they look and sound great, and more importantly, are fun to use. Although it's worth pointing out the strange way soldiers in the campaigns seem to always have diverse automatic weapons, instead of the bolt action rifles you want to see in a game set during the Great War. But I can live with it. The thing is, I can't see too much replay value here, as the campaign does next to nothing that other games haven't already done far better. Similarly to Battlefront, it can come across as basically shallow but pretty, albeit not so shamelessly. And it definitely is pretty. They even managed to keep a relatively diverse colour palette, and if you love graphics like me, you'll definitely enjoy just gazing at the scenery. The mission structure is the standard destroy this, capture that kind of stuff for the on-foot segments. Interestingly, one mission rips off the Far Cry formula where you scout an area with your binoculars, watching out for the little arrows over the enemies' heads indicating whether they've spotted you. It comes off as a cynical attempt to copy what's popular rather than create something unique and memorable. This is epitomised in the character writing. They're a mixed bag of cliches, acting out basic character tropes. You've got the dashing American Han Solo type, the old war vet training in the new blood, the mistrustful teammate who saves you in the end. There's the daring and rebellious foreign lady, and the bald villain who explains his whole plan to you. Then there's a story about an Italian guy trying to save his friend who we as the audience haven't met and have no real investment in finding, all while wearing a fucking juggernaut suit for some reason. The veteran Australian soldier is likeable, but his story boils down to the standard passing of the torch to the new generation kind of thing. Not terribly engaging. And that's the thing, the stories aren't engaging, and because they're so short, they've been written in a very condensed fashion. As in, every character has their personality compressed into their most basic traits, so that in the end all you're left with is cardboard cutout people. I found myself completely unemotional when faced with impactful moments, like when a character's story arc comes full circle when they die an epic death. Anyway, the multiplayer is where you'll truly get your money's worth. It's hard to know what to say, as there are no real new features to the formula. It's just been so well refined here. I'm not a multiplayer guy generally, but I've been really into this one. I'd go as far as to say it's some of the most fun I've had on an online shooter since Halo 3. It's essentially the standard fare of large maps with numerous players, vehicles and planes, but without all the complications of modern warfare. It's just simple weaponry, bayonet charges, grenades, and even some pretty awesome AA guns that make for some intense and immersive fighting. The customization on guns has been dumbed down, and there are a pre-made set of variants for each weapon instead of being able to build it from the ground up, putting everyone on a relatively even playing field. The maps sometimes get covered in thick fog, which flushes out snipers and brings everything a bit more close quarters. The gas grenade is another defining feature that reveals an interesting dynamic. You have to put on your gas mask to avoid choking on the stuff, but that limits you to hipfire, so there's a counterpoint to the more powerful scope weapons, further levelling the playing field. The thing is, I worry about the longevity of this game. It doesn't take long to unlock all the weapons in the multiplayer, and it starts to lose its fresh feeling after this. I guess we'll have to buy the £40 season pass for more. All in all, I would have loved a more focused single player instead of the war stories, as the very basic narratives leave you feeling rather unfulfilled. The token campaign goes to show how far these kinds of games have drifted towards being pure multiplayer. The people at the top in EA couldn't give a shit about the replayability of the stories, they just want to sell you battle packs. We all know big games like this are essentially just a business, but this one feels a little less slimy than certain other games. I'd say pick it up if you haven't already. It's relatively cheap second hand these days. Just make sure you have a good long look in the mirror before buying the season pass.